We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is, of course, the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And, of course, however you may be listening. This is going to serve as the day after video regarding Iowa's brutal second half. Just collapse, downright collapse. In defeat at the hands of the USC Trojans, and just kind of my thoughts about the program, where the program's at. I think that games like this serve as a good opportunity, a good gateway towards talking about some of these more meta big ideas or broad overviews of the program. So let's start here. Kirk Ferentz is the all-time leading coach in Big Ten history. I always get it mixed up whether he has the most Big Ten wins or he's the, I believe, I'm 99% certain it's that he is the all-time winningest coach as a Big Ten coach. Not specifically the most Big Ten wins, but he is, I believe, very close to achieving that as well. He obviously has had a great career. I don't have any animosity against him. When I first started making content and putting out blogs, sorry guys, I have a piece of ice, blogs / articles out regarding Iowa football and Iowa sports, but just to keep this kind of focused on Iowa football, the biggest possible derailment of his career occurred, which was the accusations against the program of systemic racism, of injustice, of unfair treatment of black players on the team. And I'm not going to rehash all of that, but I do think, and obviously there's going to be some that come across this video and go, oh, of course you would, do this. And you're okay to think that. I can understand you coming from your perspective thinking that. But I tried to be the most balanced perspective on the issue. Because if you remember at the time, the Iowa sports media was all over it, and they were absolutely ready to jump all over this and chastise Iowa football and, end the career of Kirk Ferentz and a lot of the Iowa football coaches, obviously Coach Doyle, Chris Doyle, which is not surprising. The Iowa media, the sports media in general, are always going to go in the direction that they think is the most profitable, that is the most palatable and acceptable. In other words, the mainstream is going to mainstream. They're going to give you mainstream perspectives. There's very few among us that offer truly insightful, critical analysis and critical thought of a big situation like that. So I just say that not to rehash that, but to merely say that I don't have this innate disdain or dislike of Kirk Ferentz, okay? Now, there's others who dislike him for a different reason, and it has nothing to do with the allegations that were levied against the program, which, as time has gone on, it's so interesting to see how so many people are so unwilling to change their opinion on the matter and have just dug their heels in even more. Because I did not want to rehash this, and I'm not. But I think most people would agree that it was not as bad as maybe initially thought. And what we were hearing from the players was not the full truth of it in its negativity. So anyways, that's that. But the other people who don't like Kirk Ferentz don't like him because he's not an offensive-minded coach. He's been at Iowa forever, and they're tired of the mediocrity. The, classic 8-4 type season, the perennially slightly above average football program that is the University of Iowa. Especially, specifically if you look at the results on the field. You have the fan base, especially when Brian Ferentz was here, that said that the University of Iowa and the football program has this massive nepotism problem. The best, especially when it comes to coaching decisions and coaching hires, the best people for the job are not being hired. Brian Ferentz was not the right candidate for the job. And obviously that bore out to be true. Brian Ferentz, in name, had some success as offense coordinator, but I think most of that was due to Ken O'Keefe behind the scenes, likely, lending a massive helping hand to the young offensive coordinator and up-and-coming offense coordinator, Brian Ferentz, who obviously had that prior relationship from his playing days and, as a family friend, likely. Again, there was a lot of truth to it. Now, personally, and I've said this before, I've never hidden it, I don't love nepotism, but I also understand that you're never going to fully get rid of nepotism. Powerful people tend to use their power. That is what happens, and it's not well regulated. And that includes in the coaching world. I'm a high-level sports official. I play Division I water polo. Just outside of that, the rest of my professional life, like this, we all know, we're all adults here. This happens, okay? People use their relationships, their connections. It does happen. Now, in certain areas, it's, more protected and regulated, probably, more like government, law enforcement type positions, county type positions. It is protected against a little bit better, but this still happens. People who have power are going to utilize and wield their power where they can. Dare I say, that's kind of the reason for power and having such a high octane position, high level position. Now, I don't want to make this into some esoteric, discussion on power dynamics, but I'm just saying, I understand it. I don't love it, but I understand it. And that's probably not my biggest issue with Kirk Ferentz. And it's not something that I'm going to spend a ton of time critiquing. So that's kind of what you have as far as the Kirk Ferentz haters. And then, you have the segment of the fan base that believes no matter what, at all costs, you are to be positive, or what they view subjectively as positive regarding Iowa football. And so I think, where we're at, broadly speaking, is kind of, there's a lot of people who say that as a fan base, we're kind of held hostage because Kirk Ferentz is a legend. He has had a decent amount of success at Iowa, but as is always the case, one can be a victim of their own success, and it is completely okay for fans to want more, which kind of brings me to my next point. And I'm going to pull up, Iowa's their record in recent years. Not only their success on the field as far as win losses go, but on top of that, the NFL draft pick success and NFL players that have been from the University of Iowa, developed at the University of Iowa, is really high. That can't go unnoticed. But for me, when I see that, it's like it makes it even more difficult to stomach, because I look at it and I see how much talent they produce and develop, and it's like they should win one of these ranked games here or there, because I personally get tired of seeing the fan base, the side of the fan base that goes, we don't have any money, it's the University of Iowa, we're supposed to lose it's like, okay, are you technically wrong? Maybe not. But isn't the point of fandom, and isn't the point of competing to win? So, like, if you don't think that you have a chance of winning and winning doesn't matter, then they shouldn't even take the field. So obviously, winning on a certain level does matter. So I get tired of hearing that myself. But as far as the victim of his own success, I do think that there is some truth to that. But obviously, there's a lot of truth to kind of the perennial 8-4, 7-5 type season that Iowa football has had. And that kind of brings me to my overarching question. And I'm going to use Wisconsin football as the example, because Wisconsin football and Iowa are quite similar as far as resources go, where they're situated, the state that they're situated, the talent in the state that they're situated. There's a lot of connections as far as personnel goes with regards to Iowa and Wisconsin football. A lot of overlap, toughness, run the football, so on and so on. And so I'm going to use Wisconsin as the backdrop, and them swinging big, moving on from Christ, and getting a big up and coming head coach in Luke Fickell, who was an Ohio State disciple, made the college football playoff. Everybody thought it was a slam dunk hire. So what is the point of being a fan? What is the point of sports? The point is to win. The point is to consistently move forward and improve. That is the point of sports. I understand context does matter, because it does. And not every single year and situation is the exact same. For example, Ben McCollum in his first year, I'm not going to weigh this success in his first year with Fran McCaffrey in his 11th year. It's not the same. But generally speaking, a program should always have goals and be striving for more, for better results, for better finishes, for a better stake, a higher stake in the conference, to increase the prestige that people view the program as. In the NCAA college football EA Sports game, they always had prestige rating, and that matters. Prestige does matter. But I do think there's a lot of fans that, for whatever reason, don't understand that. And they're just kind of like okay with just kind of like existing, which in and of itself, I'm not against to a certain degree. But for that to be the only viewpoint that you have, that you're just kind of okay, let's you go. You should be trying to win games and climb to greater heights. I do think you also should, and this is why I brought up the Wisconsin football program, you should be logical and patient and analytical in your approach to that. As I said, context matters. So, you don't want to always throw the baby out with the bathwater. But there does come a time where it's like, well, we've seen this for so long now that the evidence is clear. The evidence is there. It is what it is. Now, just to put a bow on this, in light of the USC game, okay? Well, let me backtrack. So I don't want us, nobody wants us to be the Wisconsin football program and kind of what they've turned into. But I also am okay with considering that option in order to get to greatness. But you have to have a tempered response, be logical, and actually have a plan of action. You can't just get rid of a historic coach but not have a plan in place and a better option. See, like Beth Gates, when she went out and got Ben McCollum, that was a vision. That was a clear path for success. Now, obviously, Ben McCollum is still very new, and we don't know for sure how that's going to all shake out. But still, okay, it was a very methodical approach. They went and got their person, and so I'm not even against what Wisconsin did. I'm not. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm okay with the fact that they wanted to reach for higher, fruit up on the tree, and they went out and got a big name. Did it work out? No, but they still tried. That is college sports. That is the risk of things. There's always a risk to it. But again, you just need, I'm an advocate of being logical, methodical, and analytical in your approach. Now, just my thoughts on Iowa in lieu of the USC game. I've said all year long that what was going to determine this season was Iowa's results versus the ranked opponents. And that's kind of where we're at, is each year their result against the ranked opponents is what's going to determine the outcome of the season. I know we probably do take for granted the fact that they beat the teams that they're supposed to and, tell Wisconsin that. But again, I'm okay with that. Like, I know Wisconsin is battling back and things don't look great right now, but in the end, I think it's okay. Like, sometimes you have to take risks. Sometimes you need to swing big for more. So again, I'm not in and of itself against that. Just because it doesn't work out doesn't mean it wasn't a good plan. Doesn't mean that it was necessarily the wrong choice. It just maybe was the wrong coach. That's why coaching is so important. But it's again, Kirk Ferentz is a victim of his own success. And so right now it's very difficult to be invested, at least for me. And I think there's a lot of Iowa fans like this, in the Iowa football program when there's no evidence that we can get over the hump and beat good, great football teams. Well, actually great, I would say ranked teams. Let's just say ranked teams. There's no evidence of that. Iowa is not winning the big games. The teams that they have beaten before and they know they can beat, no matter how quote unquote big of a game it is, they'll win. But I'm talking the big time games, the top 25 games where it's like, Iowa hasn't beaten them in a long time. This is maybe not in the case of Indiana or Iowa State, but it's a top 25 matchup. There's a difference between that and a big game versus Minnesota, where they're unranked. I think they're slightly different. And collectively as a fan base, we all pretty much have zero evidence to believe that Iowa is going to win those games, even though we know they have the talent to, even though we know that by and large they're well coached and for the most part they're not going to win the big games. And that's a problem, because it really does generate an apathetic, really like hostage-like feeling with regards to the program, because it's like so many of us fans, we want more, but we also aren't against Kirk Ferentz, and we don't think that he necessarily deserves to be let go or that, the baby needs to be thrown out with the bathwater. And I think that that's kind of the biggest issue with all of this is there just doesn't really seem to be any right answer, any, legitimately correct answer. Because me personally, I'm not willing to say that Kirk Ferentz needs to be let go. I'm not. I don't think that it has been, that it would be warranted yet. But I also am getting tired of being in this place where it's like, yeah, we're decent, but in the grand scheme of things, does decent really matter? Well, we can't beat the ranked teams. It's just kind of like we're decent. That's kind of where we're at, Some Iowa fans are okay with that. I think there's a lot who are not. If you look at Kirk Ferentz, since 2019, Kirk Ferentz went 10. Actually, let's go back to 2015, because I think that's probably more representative. 2015, Iowa went 12-2, although they had a pretty easy schedule. Actually, I take that back. That was the narrative. I don't think it was as easy as the media was trying to make it out to be. 2016, they went 8-5, which I'm going to circle back to that. 2016, they were loaded with talent, returning talent from that 2015 team, and they had a big, major letdown. 2017, 8-5. 2018, they went 9-4. Second in the West, third in the West, second in the West. Obviously, they won the West in 2015. That was the first time in, quite a while. After the 9-4 season, and they won in the Outback Bowl, and they finished 25th, I believe, in the coaches poll that year. They went 10-3, 6-3 in conference, and third in the West. That was actually a decent year for the West. Actually, they were ranked in the AP poll, not the coaches that year. Then they went 6-2 in the COVID year, second in the West, and played in the Music City Bowl. I think Northwestern won the Big Ten West that year, or whoever it was. After Iowa started pretty poorly, and all was lost. In 2021, they went 10-4, another 10-win season, 7-2, first place finish in the West. They lost in the Citrus Bowl. They finished 23rd in both rankings. By the way, 2019-2020, they finished 15th. In 2020, they finished 15th and 16th. But I think 2020, it's kind of hard because not every team was competing. But still, it's still a good finish. 2022, 8-5, 5-4, they were second in the West. 2023, they had another 10-win season, 7-2. They won the West, lost in the Citrus, finished 22nd and 24th in the rankings. 2024, 8-5, 6-3, tied for fifth in the conference with a massive defeat in the Music City Bowl, and now we're 6-4 right now. So they can still have a 9-win season. Obviously, Iowa has had a lot of success, and that's kind of the thing. But I think if we're all being honest, there is an element of it that is smoke and mirrors. Now, I know you can only play who's on your schedule, but it's really hard for us to be like, yeah, we are that good, when we're not beating the teams that are actually that good. That's why it's like, it's kind of this backhanded, 10-4. Where it's like, yeah, it's awesome we're 10-4, but it's not the same as being a 10-win team that beat one or two ranked opponents like they could have done this year. So, Kirk Ferentz had a massive opportunity to change the narrative this year. It didn't happen. I don't think he should go per se. But these are the games that matter. Yes, it has gotten better this year. A few years ago, Iowa was getting blown out by ranked teams. So it has gotten better. And there are aspects, especially offensively, that have improved, coupled with all the other stuff that's, normal status quo Iowa stuff. I think where I'm at, given the fact that Iowa has improved their performances and has competed with these ranked teams, even though they have ultimately fallen short, which in the end is what matters most, and I will give credence to that. I want to give one more year to see what Tim Lester can do with the offense. Because after next year, that's going to be enough time to be able to unequivocally say and give pretty steadfast thoughts and analysis of Iowa's offense under Tim Lester. And what I'm talking about is the passing game. Because quite frankly, guys, it really is not that much better. It maybe in small aspects here or there, it is better, maybe slightly more efficient. From the Brian Ferentz days, his last couple of years when Ken O'Keefe was gone, and from year 1 to year 2, maybe it's slightly improved, but not by a lot, guys, not by a lot. Especially considering the price tag that was put on Mark Gronowski. Now, also, nowadays, it's really hard to find quality QBs and guys that can pass the football and run an offense. That it's increasingly more difficult. Just based off of kind of how these kids are being developed from a young age. But that's neither here nor there. You gotta find a way to make it work. You just do. So, but I'm willing to give him one more year to see. And quite frankly, if next year the offense is not improved, the passing offense is not improved, even if the run game is solid, I think I'm going to be off of the Kirk Ferentz and Iowa football wagon. In the end, guys, I think it's totally acceptable to want more and strive for the most possible and achieve greatness. That is what this is all about. So, this is a long, long way of saying I feel where you're at. I'm in a similar position. I don't think all hope is lost. I think there has been some improvements and steps in the right direction. But we are veering towards staleness. And, the fan base kind of checking out and being done. Now, obviously, Kirk Ferentz, I don't know how much time he has left as head coach. It looks like they're veering Seth Wallace up for replacement or consideration as the replacement. Who knows? But it is okay to want more. And in the end, Iowa has fallen short. They haven't done enough to get the job done. And I think in the past, even in the 8-4 type seasons, Iowa has had, the fan base was like, no, we absolutely have a chance to win this game versus Ohio State or versus Oregon. Now, I felt pretty confident this year as well, but I don't know that that's collectively how the fan base feels. The last point that I want to make, and this has been, it's difficult to keep all of these thoughts, in points that I want to hit on. My biggest, and it was coming in and out of my mind throughout recording this. My biggest critique of Kirk Ferentz, outside of the results versus ranked teams, especially in recent years, and his results versus West Coast teams, is that his program has consistently fallen short in the years with the most expectations. What am I talking about? 2010, Ricky Stanzi. 2016, I think that was C.J. Beathard's last year as Iowa quarterback. And this year, this is one of the most talented rosters that Kirk Ferentz has had, top to bottom, depth-wise, offense, defensive line. I think that this roster is going to surprise a lot of people with the NFL draft picks. I don't know if they'll set an Iowa record, but, I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa has, 4 to 6 guys drafted. I think Aaron Graves has a shot. I think Max Llewellyn has a shot. You have Jennings Dunker, Logan Jones. Those are maybe Bo Stevens, maybe. He's a big athletic offensive lineman. Xavier Wampa, even though, his career has not seen the glory that maybe a lot of people anticipated, but I'm still happy for him that he finished his career relatively strong. And, I don't know if you guys remember Jordan Bernstein, but like he got injured and didn't really play until his senior year. So I'm happy that he got to play all the way throughout. Because we want guys that are highly rated to have success. That way we can get highly rated guys again down the line. But I think in the end, the vaunted top 25 recruiting class, while there's been varying levels of success and they haven't necessarily, displeased or been terrible, they haven't reached the success that we were maybe hoping for. And I think for Kirk Ferentz, his programs have not achieved and met expectations consistently regarding the talent level that is on the roster. It seems almost every single time Iowa has a lot of returning talent from a previously semi-successful team or super successful team like the 12-2 2015 team, they fall short. Now this year I think is a little bit different due to the schedule. I don't know how high the expectations were for that, but still there was a lot of people who had Iowa as a dark horse. And at certain points they met that expectation to some degree or another, but I think in the end fell short. So that's where I'm at, guys. Those are my day after thoughts with the USC loss. I also get so tired of people saying, well, Iowa doesn't have the resources. Guys, Iowa has one of the best fan bases in the Big Ten. They have Big Ten money. Are they up there with Ohio State, Oregon? Maybe not, as they don't have the individual donors that are as some of those schools have. But they make a ton of revenue. Okay, they don't have nothing. They don't have zero resources. And they do have talent. They develop talent. They recruit above average, I would say, above 35, above top 40 classes. And so, it can be done. It has been done. It can be done. And it's okay to want more. So I think where I'm at is I'm going to give Iowa one more year specifically to see where Tim Lester is at. And if I don't see what I want to see, I think I'm going to be officially out and ready to move on from the KF experience. That's not to say, as I've alluded at the beginning of the video, I dislike Kirk Ferentz. I don't dislike him. I think he's a hell of a coach. He's been great for the program in so many ways and is a legend. And that's a big reason why I'm willing to give him a slight pass. But still, in the end, it's okay to want more and yearn for greatness. And I know I'm only a lowly fan, but we're allowed to have these thoughts and feelings as well. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share. You guys know the drill. Last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy, Willow. In fact, our feelings because your feelings just matter. Love you, Hawk fans. Hang in there. You guys know I'll have you guys covered every step of the way. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.